So anytime we're using the oven, it's really important that before you start the process, before you even touch any of the dials or equipment, that we check to make sure that the oven is empty. Nothing worse than starting to preheat an oven and realizing you've been storing something in there for ages. So yes, this oven is empty. The other thing you want to make sure is that the oven rack is in the correct position, which for this recipe, I want it in the middle. That's perfect. Now, every oven will have different controls on it, but for this one, we're looking for either a bake or a roast for our vegetables. And we're using a high heat because we're looking to get a nice crispy exterior on our vegetables. So I'm gonna preheat this oven to 450. Once your oven rack is in the right position and you've got the oven preheated, you can get your food ready on your roasting pan or your baking pan. Now, there's a couple different options you might have at home. This is actually called a jelly roll pan because it has these edges here. Food roasted on a pan like this actually won't get quite as crisp because these edges end up steaming your food a little bit. If you're looking for a very crispy product, you're going to want to pick a roasting pan or it's called a cookie sheet that's completely flat, that doesn't have these edges. Either way, your food's going to be delicious though. Rather than putting the food directly on the pan, save yourself some time and to get a crispier effect by using either a silicone baking mat that goes on like so, or a piece of parchment paper like so. When you're picking your parchment paper, check to see whether or not the parchment paper is compostable. Most parchment papers these days are, which just reduces a bit of our waste. For our food product today, I've just done a simple mixture of potatoes and yams together because they have similar roasting times. As per the notes in the course, we talked about if there's different vegetables that you want to roast at the same time, you need to be aware of how some roast more quickly and some roast more slowly. These ones have very similar roasting times, so I've put them together. You're always going to want to coat your product in a little bit of oil so that you get a nice crisp finish. And when you are putting them on your pan, put them all out like so. We want to make sure that we add space in between all of the items. I'm just going to use my hands for this because we want that hot air to touch all sides of our food product. Okay? You can be more meticulous with this if that's important to you, but just making sure they're spread out and that they're not stacked on top of one another will help create that nice. And you know what? I've got a little bit of oil extra on that, so I'm just going to mix them around a bit to try to more evenly oil my product. Like so, making sure they're not stacked, spread out evenly. Okay. Anytime you put something in and out of the oven, make sure you're using oven mitts. The most likely place to burn yourself, as you can see, is on your forearms, which I'll show you in a moment, just to make sure you pull that rack out slightly so you're never actually putting your arms into the oven. Also, when you have your food in the roasting oven or in the oven roasting, make sure you have a safe space to pull it out in case of an emergency. I like to keep my cooling rack or a trivet or somewhere that I know I can put a hot item down safely, ready to go, and I always put oven mitts right by it so that if there's something like a fire in the oven or you need to take something out because it's burning really quickly, you are ready in a safe way to do so. If there is a fire in your oven, please make sure that you have someone there to help you, but also looking to turn the oven off, so get rid of the heat source. Keep the oven closed. Don't open the oven. That would add more air, more oxygen to fuel the fire. And hopefully you have a fire extinguisher in your home for such an occasion. But if you don't, you can use either baking soda or salt to smother the fire as well. So once it's preheated, you're ready to put things in. It's really important to ensure that your oven is preheated before you put your food product in, just because it will impact the quality of your food. And different food items, like a scone, for example, or a biscuit, they need a really hot oven in order to turn out correctly. Other things like a baked ham, things like that, think casseroles that you're preheating or reheating, it's less important, but it's still just good practice. Preheat your oven completely before you put the item in. When we go to open a hot oven, it's very important that we stand to the side rather than to the front so that we don't open the oven and get hot air all in our face. So we stand to the side, always with oven mitts on, even when you're putting things in, because actually we're very likely to burn our hands on the sides of the oven. Very few people will ever pick up a hot tray, but we do not remember, sometimes we don't remember that the oven itself is actually hot. So we open, standing to the side, we pull the rack out about a quarter of the way. With our oven mitts on, we place it down. See, my hands have never gone inside the oven. Pushing it closed, closing it up as quickly as possible so we don't lose too much heat. At this point, it's important to set a timer. So for this recipe, I've got roasted potatoes and yams, and I found through a bunch of research that you'll also be doing, the best time for this one is about 40 minutes. There we go. Try as best as possible not to peek inside the oven while it's baking or roasting, because you don't want to release any of the heat. Almost all ovens, so long as they're working, will have an oven light that you can turn on and check through the glass door in the front. Okay, when it's time to take your food out of an oven, it's really important that we follow the same principles that we followed when we're putting it in, which is that we have our oven mitts on, that we're standing to the side of the oven, opening the oven door all the way up so it doesn't snap back on ourselves, pulling the rack out part way, grabbing the pan, and putting it into a safe spot. Once we're done with the oven, we put the rack back in, close it up, making sure that we turn off both the oven light, the timer, as well as the actual oven.